Fun one for y'all today. We are joined by Tim Hagerty, play-by-play voice of the AAA El Paso Chihuahuas. Spent some time talking to him about what got him into broadcasting. Also talked about some of the prospects there in El Paso, as well as his new book. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, baseball writer for Sports Illustrated. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Because BetOnline is where the game starts. Like I said at the open, fun one for you today. Just enjoyed talking to Tim Hagerty, voice of the El Paso Chihuahuas, AAA San Diego Padres affiliate. I really enjoyed getting to hear his perspective on some of these players. Eugy Rosario, Luis Campusano. Was nice to talk to him about his background and some of the stuff that he did before he got to El Paso. And then obviously the stories. That's the big thing here is he wrote a book all about interesting stories in the minor leagues. So we kind of went through some of the interesting trade compensation in history, some of the interesting things that have delayed games in history. All in all, fun conversation. Check it out. And we are joined by Tim Hagerty, broadcaster and play-by-play guy for the AAA El Paso Chihuahuas, as well as author of the upcoming book, Tales from the Dugout, 1001 Humorous, Inspirational, and Wild Anecdotes from Minor League Baseball. Tim, thanks for joining the show. And to kind of open us up, I want to ask about, is it true that you've broadcast almost every single El Paso Chihuahuas game that has ever happened?
Yes, all but very few. 2015, I had laryngitis that sidelined me for 2 days, married. But yeah, this is the 9th season of the team, and I was with the Padres AAA team in Tucson prior to El Paso. That was the franchise that moved to El Paso. So I was lucky to get to move with the team and be part of the stadium. When I moved there, the stadium wasn't even built yet. So that's what's been so fun for me. You know, when you're the only voice of a team, you sort of become the unofficial historian. Like if somebody says, hey, whatever happened to this guy? You know, you're the person that gets asked.
It seems like a pretty nice role as far as, the stadium's not even completely built yet. So obviously you're the first person and you're kind of setting all of the precedents for how things are done and how things are going. And I know that with this franchise, not, necessarily in El Paso, but the franchise, there's a great legacy of broadcasters from Vince Contronio, Matt Viscursion, Matt Hicks, and a lot of guys who have gone on to professional baseball, have gone on to be the voice of a school for college baseball, or even ESPN in Matt Viscursion's case. When you took the job and you moved from, I think it was AA Mobile here, what were your feelings about, look at this legacy that I'm stepping into and I'm now the next person to sit in this booth? How intimidating was that?
Yeah, you did your homework on El Paso broadcast history. I've met all three guys you mentioned. All three are great. And what was obvious to me was just how much all of them loved El Paso. There's something about El Paso. It's a big city that's not near any other cities. Mm-hmm. So with that, there's such pride for everything. Always now, but in their case, the El Paso Diablos, that El Paso's always been a very enthusiastic minor league fan base, always known for loud volume from the fans. I think that from what I hear talking about that topic, the former owner of the AA El Paso Diablos, somebody that really took his time evaluating broadcasters, I think he's somewhat given credit for that when they were hiring somebody new, he really dove in and listened closely to all the, I guess back then, cassette tapes. So I think it's something like that where people are going to compare you to something else. It's really important not to be a cover band for somebody else, to really just truly be yourself, because some people are going to like this person better. Some people are going to like this person better. The radio station that we're on, 600 ESPN El Paso, for years before the Dodgers games. So there's people that grew used to hearing Vince Scully in El Paso talk about an act to follow on a station. So I remember when I first started, my second season was at AA Mobile, 2005. And I team had ever had. I was replacing a very talented professional, Tom Nichols, who was there the first 8 years of the team. And I remember there was this preseason banquet. I've never even called a game yet. And the season ticket holder comes up to me, introduces himself, and while he's shaking my hand, he said, you have a long way to go to replace Tom Nichols. Like, I haven't even called a game yet. Give me a break. But at the time, I was only 23, and I think I took comments like that. They bothered me. They made me uncomfortable. But now, 17 years later, I think you just understand that it's part of the broadcasting world. Hope to have a high approval rating, but some people will like you more than others.
Yeah, and obviously people change and mature as they get farther into their jobs, and so I'm sure that after a while people understand, like, okay, this is how he does things, and it's different from the last guy, but we love it or we appreciate it. When you kind of look back at your formative years, falling in love with baseball and deciding I'm going to go into sports media and into broadcasting, who can you see as like the big influences in the way that you call games and the way that you process and understand the game of baseball?
Yeah, when I was a kid growing up, the Sean McDonough, who's now known for ESPN, among other things. And I think it's really important not to sound like other people. I've made an effort to do that. I don't think that I do sound like others, but it was funny. This last year, my son, who's now 5, and we had on an NHL game, and Sean McDonough was doing the play-by-play. And for the first and only time in my son's life, he said, "Daddy, this announcer sounds like you." So it kind of showed me that when you mentioned the phrase formative years, I wonder if something when it came to pitch or inflection or voice did rub off on me with Sean McDonough. I mean, that can't be a coincidence that my son said that, and he's never said it about any other person on the radio or TV. And that was the guy that I listened to every night watching Red Sox games in Massachusetts. And I've been really lucky since I've been doing this professionally to have a lot of other broadcasters who helped me along the way. I think when I entered it, I thought it was a really competitive industry, which it is, but in a lot of cases, people are willing to help you, whether it's giving you pointers if you ask, or submitting a demo, or maybe even when I was younger and really trying to find the next job, help you out with a job lead that isn't publicly out there. So I was pleasantly surprised at what a fraternity it is.
And that's something consistent that I've heard from so many sports media people, from so many broadcasters and play-by-play guys, is just, how much it's a brotherhood more so than it's a competitive environment. Outside of the guys that you've met and worked with and things like that, who are some of your favorite broadcasters of all time? I mean, for most people, Vince Scully is the first one that comes to mind. I'm sure that that's probably something that you've thought about before, but just who are some of your favorites in the past?
Yeah, I grew up on the East Coast, and the truth is when Vince Scully was doing national games, I really was younger and wasn't watching then. When I was watching the World Series, it was Bob Costas and then Joe Buck. And the thing I admired the most about Vince Scully was just how good he was at an old age. I remember watching him late in his Dodgers career, just thinking, wow, this guy's 84 or whatever it was at that time that I was watching. But as far as announcers that I really like listening to, I do like to do that when you're getting your scorebook ready, put on the MLB app or put on MLB.com and grab some favorite announcers. And, I'm not necessarily saying that these people are the best, but these are the people that I like to think about that kind of help my mindset get in the right place. So the people I go to the most which is Ken Korak and Vince Cotroneo. Washington Nationals radio, I think, is outstanding. That's Dave Jagler and Charlie Slows. Joe Block is a good friend in Pittsburgh, so I'll have him on sometimes. Josh Wetzel with the Rochester Red Wings is someone who's become a friend and I think is outstanding. Kind of the core group I'll listen to. It's like musicians. You're not saying that band A is better than band B, but sometimes you're in a certain mood, you want to listen to something. So those are kind of some names that first come to mind.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs, your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can get reviews and news of every league: Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, golf, esports. They have everything. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, live in-game betting, scores, and more. They have you covered. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. We are talking with Tim Hagerty, broadcaster for the AAA El Paso Chihuahuas and author of Tales from the Dugout, 1001 Humorous, Inspirational Wild Anecdotes from Minor League Baseball, that comes out this March 21st. So since we have you on, and obviously this is a prospect podcast, I do want to kind of get some of your feedback and some of your thoughts. There was 4 current or former Chihuahuas that were moved in the Juan Soto trade. What is the reaction in a clubhouse when a trade like that happens one level above where you are? Like, how do the players react? What did the players say? And kind of what's the general thought of, okay, now I'm an injury or one illness away from taking the same lineup as Juan Soto and playing with these guys?
It's funny you say illness. That with COVID, that has become a thing. We used to always just say, I've heard players joke about that. We're a COVID outbreak away from going to the majors. But the thing that I noticed the most when it comes to the trade deadline is actually the couple of days before. I remember years ago, there was this player with El Paso who went on to play for the Padres, and he just kind of sidled up to me in the dugout before batting practice one day, and he said, "So, what do you think is going to happen on the deadline?" Like, it was so obvious that it was just weighing on this guy. Not that he was going to get traded, but he's thinking, if player A, B, and C get traded in the majors, I might get called up. And in his case, he was right. This year, El Paso was at Tacoma to the deadline. They did not have a good series. And one member of the staff with the team down there in the dugout during games, he said, "We just got to get past the deadline." He said, "Guys are not focused on this day's game," which is understandable. Years ago, I interviewed Bobby Kelty. Remember him? Twins, Blue Jays. Mm-hmm. So he probably came up early 2000s, if my memory is correct. And he said when he was coming up, he had no idea which minor league teammate was on the 40-man roster or who was on the prospect list or what they were saying about him. He had no idea. When he showed up to a AA game, it was just like college where he had his teammates. And he made the point that these days with smartphones, I mean, you can type your name into Twitter if you're a prospect, and every time you do that, new stuff will pop up. In that regard, I think it is hard mentally for a minor league player. A lot of us would give into that temptation, and then maybe something you read, if it comes from a really established person, creeps into your head. But as far as after the deadline, like you were saying, in the Padres Nationals trade, for example, I think because really know that something might be coming. Like, they're not surprised when their teammate gets traded, because in a lot of cases, they read it might happen.
Mm-hmm. They've kind of gotten some, proposals have been put out there, or, like 5 destinations for Juan Soto, and they see some stuff and they can kind of put things together. Talking about some of the current minor league players, a few Chihuahuas just got called up to San Diego, specifically Luis Campusano and Rosario. Is it Eugy Rosario? Am I saying that right?
Eggy, fun name, yeah.
Eugy Rosario.
Yeah, I asked him that the first day I met him, and what a fun name.
So I kind of want to ask you about both these guys. And the first one is Campusano played a little bit in 2020. I think he actually got 1 game at the bigs, but 2021 was up and struggled a little bit, didn't necessarily have the outcomes that he wanted to have. And so what have you seen him do differently this year, and kind of how you think he's grown as a player so that this call up here in 2022 is going to go a little bit better for him?
Yeah, I think the phrasing on a lot of the articles you read about him is a bat first catcher. And I think
Mhm.
by his admission, by the Padres' admission, they would agree with that. So the thing I've noticed with him, very free working on his catching, on receiving, on blocking balls, on throwing. He has a great arm. And there were some subtle things you'll notice where on a meeting at the mound, he's really animated with talking to that pitcher. I remember watching a recent game at home. This is the middle of the game. It wasn't a dramatic ninth inning situation. Land left a couple of runners on base with a pop up to the outfield. And as that ball was caught, Campusano just gave a fist pump down by his side. And that showed me this is a guy who's really committed, devoted to that day's game. Even at a time when there were some Padres catchers in the major league, I think a lot of people might wallow in that and think I should be called up. But he didn't do that. I think when he was with El Paso, he was really locked in on that day's game. And as you described, he went to the majors in 2020 at a very young age. At that time was probably only 23 now. Sometimes when guys make it that fast, you don't realize how young they still are. I mean, Luis could be a Padres catcher for a long time.
Watching Eugy Rosario, fantastic year there. 293, 374, 520, 21 home runs. So I'm interested to see how his game translates to the MLB level, but also what does it do to a AAA team who is coming in the stretch run of the season and losing a key player like that to the bigs? I'm sure everybody's happy for him, but kind of what does that do to the rest of the team and the morale for everybody in the clubhouse?
I think there's a recognition that every AAA team loses players. So
Mm-hmm.
the truth is, I think most AAA rosters are better in June than they are in August for that exact reason, because there's more call-ups along the way. You look at, for example, for assignment, Nomar Mazara. So there is a Chihuahuas player who goes up for him, Jose Azocar, and El Paso does not get anybody back. It's different than somebody being optioned who's coming back down to AAA. So there's no doubt El Paso's lineup has a little bit less sock than it did 3 days ago. But I think that the teams they're competing against to try and go to the playoffs, you can probably say the same thing about them.
You've watched this team all season, and I know that the top 30 prospect list, obviously, that's what a lot of the fans are looking at, and they see the guys who are highly rated, like a Campusano, like a Rosario. Is there some unheralded prospects that maybe we're not talking enough about that are on this team? And the first guy that I thought about was maybe like a Tyler Colway or somebody. But who are we not talking enough about that we should be paying more attention to there in El Paso?
Yeah, Colway was the first name that came to mind when you asked that. In a small town, he told me once that he was surprised to get drafted. He didn't even think he was going to get drafted, and he gets that call. Oh, okay, sure. That's how off the radar he was up at University of Wisconsin La Crosse. So he's turned himself into a machine. He has one of the best on-base percentages in AAA. Had a great season last year as well. He has some strength, but he's not going to hit a ton of home runs. He's quick enough in the outfield, but he's not going to steal a ton of bases. But the thing that he does so well is maybe the most important thing, in that he's really hard to get out. Long at bats, a lot of foul balls. And here we are in late August, and he has a 400 on-base percentage. So he hasn't made it to the Padres. I do think he will make it to the majors somewhere with somebody. I believe he's at a point now that he'll be a minor league free agent after this year. So maybe he'll next year, or maybe even late this year if something happens. But to me, if I had to look into a crystal ball, I could see Taylor maybe signing a minor league deal with a non-contending team next year and ending up in the majors. Maybe he's playing for Louisville and the Reds have an injury and he's in the big leagues with the Reds by May, something like that.
We are talking to Tim Hagerty, broadcaster for the AAA El Paso Chihuahuas and author of the new book, Tales from the Dugout, 1001 Humorous, Inspirational, and Wild Anecdotes from Minor League Baseball. And this book comes out March 21st. It's actually your second book. Your first one was about off-the-wall team names and the stories behind them. So I know that in your free time, you write for a lot of different outlets as far as freelance pieces and things go. What made you decide to write a book about minor league baseball team names and then a book about some of these stories that you've collected over the years and that you've researched and found out?
Yeah, my first book came out in 2012. The origin for that was in 2004. My first year doing this, I was the broadcaster for the Idaho Falls Chuckers. And that was the first year of that team name at the time. And so many people would ask me, what is a chucker? Where does that name come from? So I developed an interest in some history of minor league team names. And there really was in mind one that explained the team names, that had some images next to it. So for the next 7-8 years, that was my side project. I worked on it. I had no idea how this would get from my laptop into a bookstore. So at the time, I actually bought How to Get Your Book Published for Dummies, which talked about how to write a proposal, how to contact people, what a publisher is looking for. So that was a great experience. That was in 2012. And as part of that research, I came across a story in 1888 of a Texas League game being delayed by a wild bull when it ran on the field in Austin, Texas. I was reading this in a newspaper archive. And I thought, well, if I've never heard of this story and I do this for a living, I don't think a lot of other people have either. And I found just so much stuff from minor league history on newspapers.com, on old Spalding and Reach baseball guides, interviewing people. And then as far as more modern stuff, making a note when you see that the State College Spikes in 2016 have a game delayed when a goat goes on the field. Okay, you make a note of that, save the link, tracking some modern stories. And I should say a SABRE member, Al Arrigi, also got into this and assisted me with research, and he found some great stuff as well. So yeah, I've been working on this one since 2012, and it's great to see it out there now and available.
Yeah, it's a publication date March 21st, but in the meantime, wherever you get your books, Amazon, local independent bookstores, go ahead, pre-order it now so that you have it when it comes out. What is craziest story that's happened for a game that you've been broadcasting? And I'm thinking about maybe the one that happened in Mobile.
Yeah, that was the first one that came to mind. So out of the 1,001 stories in the book, I'd say only about a dozen are from games that I covered. But one was 2007, Mobile at Montgomery. And Mobile had this pitcher, Matt Elliott, who allowed the game-tying home run in the bottom of the 8th inning. And he got so upset that he went into the dugout bathroom and slammed the door. And when he slammed the door, the lock somehow jarred and connected to the wall. And he locked himself in the bathroom. Well, he's still the pitcher in the bottom of the 9th inning. Mobile takes the field, and there's no pitcher, but there's nobody warming up. The manager, Brett Butler, is literally scratching his head, talking to the umpires. They had to bring in a new pitcher because Elliott was locked in the bathroom and was stuck in there until 40 minutes. The Montgomery Fire Department had to get this door open and let him out. And this poor guy, who was a very nice guy, but this was illustrated in the New York Times. He became known as the guy who got locked in the bathroom that year.
And so when you're researching the book and you're getting all of these stories, I imagine that there's a lot of different ways you can think of to sort this and order this. Is it chronological? Is it by like, here's the section on animals that have interrupted games? Like, how do you organize all of this for a book?
Exactly. That was a decision because the story is stretched from 1877 to 2022. What I just agreed with that this was fine, was go by category. So there's like 6 or 7 chapters. One of them is batters and runners, pitchers and fielders, umpires and leagues, teams and ballparks, wildlife and nature, as you predicted. And then there was this pile of stories that really were so bizarre they didn't fit in anything. So I just called that the best of the rest. And that's how we closed the book.
The best of the rest. Of the 1001 stories, what is your favorite story from the book? Like the one that you just blew your mind when you read it, couldn't believe it was true, and it turns out it's real.
Yeah. Man, great question. I always was entertained by the crazy trades which have happened over the years. For example, in 1921, Dallas traded a pitcher, Joe Martina, to New Orleans and that wasn't the only one. A couple of years later, 1930, There's this Wichita Falls pitcher named Yule Moore. He got traded for a plate of beans. And then that same year, a San Antonio player got traded to Dallas for a dozen donuts. So I have some of these crazy trades in there. Two more, if we have time. I'll make them fast.
Yeah.
2 more quick trades. 1931, Chattanooga had this really headline-grabbing owner, Joe Engel, and he traded his shortstop to Charlotte for a turkey, and he served the turkey at their winter banquet, and he said the turkey was having a better year.
There's like a legendary story that somebody got traded once for a bag of baseballs. Is that true? Do you know?
Yes. Kerry Lightenberg got traded from an independent club in Minnesota to the Atlanta Braves for 24 baseballs. But there's one around the time of Lightenberg in the 90s, around the same era. Mm-hmm. In 1997, San Diego got a minor league catcher from Cleveland, Sean Mulligan, for a treadmill. Kevin Towers, the late general manager, who I got to know, just a great guy. I mean, for all his and so funny. And the Padres needed a treadmill, and they were talking, and they said, well, instead of trading him for cash considerations, can you ship me a treadmill? And Cleveland said, okay.
I guess it's very dependent on need at that time. And it's like, we could go out and do all of this. We could just have them give us one. And so I wonder if you have to put like minimum standards on the performance of the treadmill so that you're not, it's not like a poor performing treadmill. It's like, it has to have these features. I can't think about how to work that out.
Is there like a warranty? Like if it breaks after 1 month, do you get the player back? Good.
Yeah. Who's covering that? Or, the donuts. I can't, I assume I just have to ask about the donuts. I assume they were local donuts that were really good, or there was some sort of unique thing about the donuts, or was it literally just donuts?
That's what I really tried to get into, was the newspaper archives, and really try to tell, okay, is this totally a publicity stunt? What's the origin of this? The guy, Joe Martina, for example, he was from New Orleans, and his family, they were oyster shuckers. So it was kind of, we're trading the oyster guy for oysters, was the origin of that. On the donuts one, got reading between the lines that the team was so upset with this player, Len Dondero, that not only do we want you to leave town, we want you to get out of here for only a box of donuts. It was a rough and tumble time back then. People were not always sensitive. That's what I found in this book and other research, is there's this perception that professional baseball in the 1800s or in the early 1900s was gentlemanly. It is absolutely not true. It has never been true. It was a time when, and I have some of these in the book, umpires, they physically would punch umpires. There were times that umpires were chased out of ballparks. There was this poor guy named Kane, don't know his first name, in the early 1900s, 1905. He was umpiring a game in Toledo, and he gets bombarded with eggs, with mud flying at him. He's running out of the ballpark trying to get back to his hotel. It was not a peaceful time. It was a time where these players, they were a bad season away from going back to their hometowns and working in a mine or a factory or a construction site. We're coming out of college baseball the way they are now. And these guys, for that reason, they were playing brutally, viciously. And I try to give a flavor for that. I don't describe things that were like violent, but there's some scene that will blow people's mind compared to what happens now. Another one of my favorites, 1899, kind of along the same lines. There was this player, Mike Donlin, who went on to be a pretty solid major leaguer. Donlin was a good ball player, but spent a lot of time at saloons. And in 1890, the Cardinals, from jail, he was in jail for public drunkenness in Santa Cruz, California, where he was playing for a minor league team. And the Cardinals wanted him. And they sent a telegram to the jail saying, can you get him on a train? We want him to play for us.
I can just imagine how that would go now if a prospect was called up and he was currently in jail from, something like that. Just how big of a story that would be and how impossible it would be to get that player. So It's so if you want to be entertained and you want your preconceived notions about what baseball was like back in the old days, challenge, definitely go out and get the book. Comes out March 21st, available wherever you get your books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the different providers. Tim, if folks want more information about you, want to follow you and what El Paso does, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, thank you. I'm on Twitter at TD Hagerty, and that's 1G, Hagerty. And yeah, like you said, the book's available on Amazon and also on Barnes and Noble. Independent bookstores as well have it. So that's what's been fun, is to really see how many people go into a book. There's editors, there's designers, there's salespeople that made this. So thanks for letting people know about it.